Hello, everyone. I'm connecting from Dublin. I'm the Director of AI and Data Science at Shutterstock and the Global President of Women in AI. And as you can imagine, my passion is helping more women to enter the AI space and work together as a community towards ethical AI.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Galdos, and I am a global leader of the Sustainability Lab at SAP global level. I start at SAP the Netherlands. I am connecting from Rosmalen. I am also a member of the SAP Business Women Network, also a member of Women in Tech, the Netherlands. And I am totally passionate about technology, diversity and inclusion, and sustainability.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pinar. I'm joining from London today. I like to call myself a business activist. At least I aspire to be one. I'm working on to build companies that are financially stable, human-oriented, and have a deep-rooted culture of respect. So I'm founder of TAKK and Punk Business School. TAKK is a peaceful shopping platform fighting against overconsumption, and also Punk Business School, which is a business school, exists to put humanity at the heart of business education.
So I'm TheBenMeadows. I'm joining y'all from Phoenix, Arizona. So it's right about noon right now. First of all, I just wanted to say I'm honored to be on stage with all these incredible people. My passion is sort of blockchain technology. I got involved in it over a decade ago, mostly because of the decentralization of it. However, as Web3 has evolved in the last couple of years, 2-3 years, it wasn't just the decentralization of it, it was the democratization of it that was really impressive to me, how it lowered barriers to entry for creativity, for making art, for collecting art. So that's what I'm passionate about. From the technology side here today. I think we don't know what Web3 is yet. I think we're in Web 2.5, or in the sense that we use all these Web 2 technologies in Web3 still. You know, we use Twitter to communicate or LinkedIn. So I think in one way, Web3 right now is something we hope, but we can't define it totally yet. We'll look back on it when we're in Web 4. And we'll know exactly what Web3 was. I think we're still in an early enough phase that there's all this opportunity in front of us, and we can choose to squander that or not. We can choose to improve representation in Web3 in a way that doesn't exist in Web2, or we can let big companies come in and not do that. Web3 and the technology behind it is just another hammer. It's a tool, and you can use a hammer for good or for bad. So I think we have the opportunity to make it and mold what Web3 is going to be.
I see Web3 as a sophisticated, technically capable young person with a huge potential and motivation to shake existing power structures, but it's kind of awaiting some form of education to draw its principles at the moment. So in that sense, I find what Circle of Trust do is very valuable. Web2 also had similar potential in terms of this distributive justice, which was partly realized for some creative industries. But actually, it ended up being benefiting a handful of people instead of serving to humanity as a whole.
A step back. Let's talk about 3 things very quickly, right? The first thing is technology. Decentralization, blockchain, all those new elements that we attribute to Web3, fundamentally they exist for many years and are applicable to any web eras. What has dramatically changed in the last couple of years? Actually, it's not about the web protocols, but more the compute powers that has been enabled. So definitely storage and compute have grown exponentially. So third aspect is the application. What do we build on top of what we called Web3? It's new application powered from very innovative technology, which are fueled from this availability of storage at low cost and high computational power, like generative technology, ChatGPT, that are going to enable new application in the web. So what I believe is an interesting observation was the concept of trust. And what do we want to enable in the future of technology that is available to all of us?
Yes, I think it's urgent because it's already happening, and it is scary to many people. And I think the best way to manage fear is to educate ourselves around it. As like humanity face existential crisis today, right? Like climate change, worsening inequality, deepening social injustice. I mean, the solution to these problems we face today are complex, and we have to embrace this complexity. We need to embrace them honestly and engage with them intelligently as much as we educate ourselves. What Web3 can potentially enable is all about humans and human relationships. And it's moreover about like competing demands of freedom and equality. And these are not technical jargons. These are more of a philosophical concepts and are like very much like related to the discussions around Web3 now. So I think it's really time for all of us to engage in this discussion to define what are the fundamental principles. I mean, about the urgency, people like to talk about the risks, but what I find more risky is like the risk of keep having a handful of people holding the most of the world's capital resources and deciding on how we should communicate, deciding on how we should consume, or even like to another extent, how should be the philanthropic priorities are. The way to get out of this trap is really to educate ourselves and engage in meaningful conversation.
First of all, generative AI is technology that is able to generate something new. We ask this technology what we want to see or what we want to read or what we want to hear, and that technology provides a soundtrack, a piece written in natural language or an image, right? So it's able to generate new asset, new digital assets. Why is very powerful? Because it has reached a maturity, this technology that, by the way, has started many years ago. Generative technology and adversarial network in AI have been more than 10 years research field, but today have reached very mature stage, and what they can generate, it's very authentic in the look. It's very realistic, although it can generate very imaginary concept. And a horse with wings running on the moon on a nice lake, right? And doesn't exist for real, but you can see it. That is an actual horse, is the moon, nice lake, and that horse has wings, right? So that's the fundamental technology. Why everyone is talking about it? One other consideration, it's not just about OpenAI. There is Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, LG, Google, Meta, IBM. Everyone is working on this technology, and there is an entire research community of people everywhere in the world that are working on those fundamental models. One of the first, OpenAI, achieved amazing result, and therefore it's one of the most known. This technology enables us to achieve achieve things that we couldn't do before. It's, for example, like calculator before they existed. Everyone had to do the math operation by hand. And it was a process, it was tedious, it was long, it was human error. And technology has brought us an ability to compute at a high speed. Today, we are computing things that are much more complex than few numbers. We are computing the things that resonate what humans are able to generate. And therefore, they will enrich our life. Possible issues or things that we should be careful is misinformation. If you have enough video of me giving talks, talking to different conferences, then you can create a version of myself in the Web3 Gala, talking about how much I hate Evenness because it's so anti everything I believe, which I will never say because I have the deepest admiration for what Evenness is doing, right? So we need to be careful. And digital content, we are not able to differentiate between false and true. If you lie to my face, I can pick up that that's a lie because we have body responses to a person lying to our face. In the digital space, we have no natural defenses. And therefore, we are easy subject to misinformation and manipulation.
I would say one of the interesting things with AI, specifically generative AI, is sort of what Alessandra was talking about earlier, that right now it's a change in the amount of data we're feeding into it. It's a change in the amount of processing power we're throwing at it. But most of these models are not brand new models. We're using them in new ways. And I think the newness of them has us sort of awestruck by what they're putting out. But I think there's a bigger change coming that won't be just a change of size. It'll be a change of kind or type. So all that to say, I don't know that we know what's coming on the horizon, but it'll be beyond what we can currently imagine. And so now is the time to sort of get our priorities straight with this technology and figure out what we want it to do, in terms of improving the world and what safeguards we need to put on it in terms of making sure it doesn't mess things up any worse than they are now. But I don't think we're seeing where the technology is going yet. I think all of us are going to be surprised in 5 or 10 years by its potential.
Business are really under pressure and under pressure from different stakeholders. Think about customers, investors, employees, regulators. Currently, there are more than 600 regulations of initiatives that are demanding companies to become ESG compliant. And ESG are now the hottest letters in the digital agenda today. ESG, if everybody's familiar with that, stands for environmental, social, and governance. ESG standards and practice indicate to different stakeholders the organization commitment to achieve a greater good. So I think we all will agree that we will feel, better when our employer is committed to the ESG standards. And now, since sustainability is not a journey at a destination, we have in this journey, there are different challenges that the companies need to solve. First, think about how to gather this ESG data along the entire value chain of Web3. So the customer or the companies need to gather data and record this data. Then not only record, but also report. Companies need to keep up with the current ESG requirements. to report along the respective regulatory and voluntary frameworks. And last but not least, and maybe the most important one, is to act. Companies need to close the gap between strategy and action. It's not only about having a bold sustainability strategy, but this should convert to an action. And how can companies do that? By embedding sustainability through all their business processes in Web3 solutions. And now, if we talk about the principles, I think when we are developing, when the Web3 is evolving, we should keep in mind that this needs to contribute to the 3.0 sustainability or 3.0 sustainability vision. The 3.0 sustainability is zero emissions, zero waste, and zero inequalities. But now I would like to focus on the zero emissions. So the Web3 is not 100% virtual. Why? Why is not? Because sustainability, the sustainability of Web3 depends on energy that derives from the physical world. So we still, the Web3 still needs to make use of data centers, the storage and cooling, and this represents like around 65-80% of the share in energy use. And now, if you think about it, only 12% of the energy in the US comes from renewables. I mean, we need to move to energy, to clean energy in order to create a positive impact. But don't think only about the servers, the storage and the cooling, but think about the efficiency in creating the algorithm. So I think that computer scientists need to learn coding techniques that allow them to design and program energy efficient algorithms. They need to learn how they can apply to an algorithm to reduce the energy consumption. And not only that, but also how to measure, because we go back to the fact that companies need to record, report, and act, right? So they need to measure. But this is not the only thing that can be done to reach zero emissions, but also educate users and consumers. For example, what consumers can do is to prefer to stream in a standard definition instead of high definition, because high definition, of course, has a higher environmental impact in terms of carbon emissions. Then encourage energy efficient behavior. Teach consumers to reduce their energy usage when using Web3. For example, they can avoid excessive use of graphics, excessive use of animations. For example, this environment looks great, but the question is what sustainable design? So there are some things that the customers can do. Now, if we talk about the zero waste, we can impose a circular economy. You know? Customers could make use of second-hand devices in order to reduce the e-waste. And another point that also includes, also considers the impact in sustainability will be the zero inequalities. That the metaverse, the Web3 should be guided by social responsible principles. This should consider that Web3 should be accessible, affordable, and inclusive. So think about people with disabilities, think about the personal boundaries, that people should be treated with respect in the same way they are treated in the real life.
My name's Antonia Forster, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a senior XR technical specialist and an advocate at Unity. So Unity, for anyone who's not familiar, is an engine for creating any kind of virtual experience, very popular for games, but you can really use it for anything that you can imagine, any kind of digital, interactive, real-time 3D content. So I specialize in mixed reality, so creating virtual reality and augmented reality experiences using Unity. So I specialize in taking taking complex technical information and breaking it down into simple language. I did that in the field of science and zoology for some time. I then worked in a planetarium making 3D 360-degree virtual content. And from there, I transitioned into virtual reality and became a virtual reality specialist. I don't have a degree in computer science. I learned to code using basically YouTube and Unity Learn. If you have a disability that's physical or mobility related, it might be difficult to commute, for example. If you have a neurodivergence, there might be difficulties in working. For example, I actually have ADHD, I'm neurodivergent myself. I find it very difficult to work in an open plan office because I'm very easily distracted. And I also tend to oscillate between really lack of focus and like hyper focus and not being able to come out. So that's very challenging when there's kind of constant interaction. But actually working remotely is really much more accessible for me personally because I can, if I'm not focused, I can do lots of kind of small tasks. If I'm hyper focused, that's when I can code and I can kind of do it for 12 hours and just, work really, really deeply and kind of work around myself. If you yourself don't have a team with that group of people represented, then at least have a consultant or a focus group or representative within the community that you liaise with very regularly from the very beginning of your design process. I think it's very dangerous to build something and then as an afterthought to add inclusion in. And that often doesn't work because you'll find that key features, so things like your locomotion system or even the hardware itself or the packaging on your hardware. If you're thinking about accessibility, it's so important to think from the very beginning to the very end of the pipeline. What do you mean by accessibility? Which specific people are you trying to access? What problems will they have? And how can you make sure you're not putting up additional barriers? I have seen like plugins that people have created that work with Unity. So even if they're not created by Unity, there's so many people out there using the Unity editor that there's all sorts of different plugins and accessibility packages. Fonts are a really easy one. For example, if you're in a VR chat world and there's lots of bloom, like a post-processing light effect, there's actually an object someone created, a third-party person, not working at Unity, which is a pair of sunglasses that your character can put on, and it reduces all light intensity and it also reduces sound intensity, which means that for someone potentially who's autistic or someone who has, I sometimes get sort of sensitivity issues, you can place these on and it will sort of dampen everything. And another example is if you're in VR chat and you're deaf or partially deaf and someone talks to you from behind you, you may not realize. VR chat actually has a large number of deaf users. There's in fact whole worlds where people use hand tracking to learn sign language, either BSL or ASL. But if you're a deaf user and someone talks behind you, you may not realize. So I've seen another tool where if people tap you on the shoulder virtually, an avatar taps your avatar, something will come up in front of you to say, hey, someone's behind you. And then you can turn around and interact with them. I'm a member of the LGBT community. The strongest predictor of homophobia is a lack of exposure to queer people and queer stories. So I approached a number of people and asked them, if you had your story represented in a museum using one object from your life, what would you choose and why? And I allowed people to choose any object from their life that they wanted. I scanned the object using a technique called photogrammetry, where you take lots of images and stitch them into a 3D object. I asked them to explain what the object's significance was. So we have 2 to 3 minutes of audio in their own voice. And then I created a virtual museum to put those objects in. I worked with another developer very closely, Thomas Terkelsen, who's based in Denmark. He's also a member of the LGBT community. And together we built this virtual space to center queer stories. Throughout history, some people's experiences are erased or lost. We wanted to build a space to preserve and celebrate those stories. And now we're open for visitors.
Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin was my first clumsy attempt at age 14 to come out to my family. I would leave the book around the house and hope that someone would spot it and start a conversation about me being gay.
These are my wedding shoes. We fell in love in the early 80s. We felt like any other couple, just getting on with our lives. But we kept being reminded that we were not allowed the luxury of just ordinary.
I identify as a black, queer, polyamorous person.
I grew up in a Christian family in Ghana.
As a non-binary person,
I'm a gender non-conforming woman.
I'm a transgender man, and I turn 40 years old this year.
This over life-size Carrara marble statue is the first and only marriage equality monument in the world. I sculpted this when gay marriage was illegal anywhere and everywhere in the United States. What I couldn't have in life, I would have forever in death.
Over time, the church pulpit became a bipolar symbol of love and hate.
Other people will turn out to
same-sex attraction.
to stand by my fellow
now believe
soldiers.
that
But as long as we
your
carry
side
torches for
may be sick
ourselves and for
with
each
my
other,
love.
we'll never be alone in the dark.